another episode of Fight Week Live. Today, the Fight Week team is in San Jose, California, as Strikeforce World Welterweight Champion Nick Diaz will make his second title defense when he faces the Brazilian powerhouse Evangelista Cyborg. And Strikeforce Middleweight Champion Jacare Souza puts his belt on the line for the first time as he steps into the cage with powerful knockout artist Ruthless Robbie Lawler in the co-main event. Also on the card, football legend Herschel Walker will return to the cage to face Scott Carson. Undefeated Roger Gracie will compete against National Wrestling Champion Trevor Prangley. We were at the weigh-ins today. Let's take a look.
Thanks, Sam. We are here at the HP Pavilion in San Jose, California for the weigh-ins for Strikeforce's Diaz versus Cyborg. The fighters are about to step on the scales now. Let's see what happens. Light heavyweights kick off our action live on Showtime as Roger Gracie takes on Trevor Prangley. The 10-time World Jiu-Jitsu champion Gracie weighed in at 206 pounds, while the South African Prangley weighed in at 205 1/4 pounds. The second bout is in the heavyweight division as former NFL stand-up Herschel Walker returns to the cage. He faces Scott Carson. Former Heisman Trophy winner Walker weighed in at 220 3/4 pounds, while Carson came in at 214 pounds. Champion Ronaldo Jacare Souza returned to the Strikeforce cage to defend his title against Ruthless Robbie Lawler. The champion Souza weighed in at 184 1/4 pounds, while Robbie Lawler weighed in at 184 even. Relative respect turned into animosity today at the weigh-ins as champion Nick Diaz faced off against Evangelista Cyborg Santos. Both men weighed in at 169 1/2 pounds for their championship tilt.
As always, Fight Week brings you expert analysis in the field. Greg Savage is joined by Jordan Breen to break down the main card.
Thanks, Sam. We're here in San Jose, California for tomorrow night's broadcast of Nick Diaz versus Evangelista Cyborg Santos, and Jordan Breen's here to break down the four-fight card with me. First fight of the night, Roger Gracie taking on Trevor Prangley in a light heavyweight bout. What should we expect in this one?
I think you expect good grappling from Roger Gracie. He's clearly the best grappler in the world, extremely accomplished. And more than that, Trevor Prangley, long in the tooth at this point in time, great wrestler, very physically tough. But we saw in the fight with Tim Kennedy, he can be exploited in the submission department, and there's no one with more rich of an opportunity to do that than Roger Gracie. Probably the most accomplished grappler, along with Marcelo Garcia of the last 10, 15 years, even though he's still an MMA neophyte and really hasn't dedicated himself full-time to mixed martial arts yet with just 2 fights in about 4 years. He is someone with superlative skill on the ground, and once he gets it there, should be able to find a way to get a submission over Trevor Prangley, someone who at this point in time offers a stern, stiff test to an up-and-comer, but isn't a serious contendership threat.
Now, Roger Gracie brings strict fundamentals to the grappling game. He doesn't have a whole varied attack. It's very, very narrow, but it's very, very good at what he does. Is there any way Trevor Prangley can avoid any of that?
I mean, he can definitely try to shut down the takedown, stay on his feet a bit, and beat up Roger Gracie on the feet, because he's obviously got an advantage there just by the fact that Trevor Prangley's been an MMA fighter for much, much longer than Roger Gracie, who even admits, I'm working on my striking, but obviously it's not quite there yet. But Roger Gracie eventually got Kevin Randleman to the ground. Kevin Randleman's a good wrestler in his own right. I think eventually he gets it there. Trevor Prangley has a chance for success early on the feet, but I do think we'll see another textbook, fundamental Roger Gracie submission. As you mentioned, what's most interesting about him is, in spite of being such a dominant grappler, in spite of submitting the best grapplers in the world, he always does it with really simple, fundamental techniques. Cross chokes from Matt when he's in the gi, arm bars when he's in no-gi, very strict textbook stuff, but just does it to an absolute T with the utmost perfection.
And as that fight gets deeper and deeper, it favors Roger Gracie more and more, with Trevor Prangley's noted lack of cardio as well.
Yes.
I like Roger Gracie in this one as well. Next up, we got a featured attraction. We've got Herschel Walker taking on Scott Carson. And what do you see coming out of this fight?
I think it's hard to imagine what it's going to look like, largely based on the fact that Scott Carson's fought once in nearly a decade, and Herschel Walker is still a spectacle, a feature attraction, someone that the very fact that he's fighting, the reason we're interested is simply because we don't know what we're going to get. He is a football player and a guy who still thinks he can play football, still thinks he has a place on the depth chart for the Atlanta Falcons. I do think that Herschel Walker will probably win. He's been concentrating on an MMA career now for 18 months, which is more intensively than Scott Carson has been in the recent past. But I wouldn't be surprised. After all, Bobby Lashley, who's a far more youthful athlete and someone that has serious wrestling chops, was beaten up by Chad Griggs, a guy who, kind of washed out of the IFL, wasn't really thought of as any serious threat. And although there was some shaky refereeing in the state of Texas that allowed that to happen, still we saw that Lashley was flawed, even though Griggs was brought in to be simply a tune-up opponent. So when you're dealing with anyone who has that little experience, there's always definitely a chance that someone kicks over the apple cart, and it could definitely be Scott Carson, even though I do anticipate a win for Herschel Walker, though it might not be as easy as the Greg Nodge fight last January.
And I would anticipate a lot of grappling in this fight. We're not going to see a lot of stand-up. Herschel Walker is not very proficient on the feet, and he'll admit to that. The grappling game is what is more natural to him, and I think that's what we'll see. I think you'll see Herschel Walker control position and probably win a decision.
And it insulates him from some of the threat. If he was someone that took to the striking more naturally, being someone who's not that well-versed in MMA, maybe wouldn't have a plan B. The fact that he is so powerful and can put guys on the ground, I think insulates him from some of the harm of what might come in the striking department against someone who's vastly more experienced than Scott Carson.
Agreed. Next up, a championship fight in the middleweight division. Ruthless Robbie Lawler's going up against the champion Jacare Souza. This one is a special fight at 185 pounds. What do you expect?
Well, I expect a great fight. I think what's exciting about it is even if Jacare wins every round, 5 minutes after 5 minutes, taking Robbie Lawler down, even outboxing him, Robbie Lawler still has the ever-present overhand right and massive left hook. He has 2 punches that can completely change a fight in the blink of an eye.
Ask Melvin Manoff.
Ask, any of one he's knocked out recently, Matt Lindland, a whole string of brutal knockouts for Robbie Lawler. And Jacare's been knocked out in both of his losses, his first career fight to Makako Patino and his last loss to Gegard Mousasi. And if you've ever been knocked out, there's a pretty good chance if Robbie Lawler touches you, it might be Mimi's. So I really do think that Robbie Lawler, even though he doesn't deserve to be the favorite, is someone that, if you're looking at betting odds, think plus 200, he's got a real chance to land one punch. He's got 25 minutes to land 1 or 2 strikes and finish off Jacare. But I do think Jacare deserves to be the favorite. He's a superlative grappler. We talked about Roger Gracie. Jacare is a bit smaller than Roger Gracie, but in his prime, there was only 2 guys who could really challenge Roger Gracie in gi or no gi grappling. One was Sanjay Ribeiro, the other was Jacare Souza. He's a brilliant athlete, extremely good takedowns from the clinch, from the outside. He can put Robbie Lawler on his back and threaten him. If Robbie Lawler can weather the storm early, do what Joey Villasenor did in his bout with Jacare early and survive, get into rounds 2, 3, 4, 5, there is definitely a chance that he can land one big hard shot and end up becoming Strikeforce middleweight champion.
I have 2 concerns about that breakdown. Maybe you can answer them. First off, does Robbie Lawler have the defensive grappling ability that Joey Villasenor has displayed in the past to keep this thing standing or get back up once he is put on his back? And will Jacare even try and put this thing on the ground? He seems to have fallen in love with his striking.
Yeah, the love for Jacare, and not even just his striking, his boxing, he really, really loves to use his hands. And that's a bit perilous because if you look at history, it suggests that if you're going to get to Robbie Lawler, use low kicks. Pete Spratt tore his groin and hip apart with low kicks. Melvin Manouf was doing him in brutally with low kicks. And even Babalu Sobral in his decision win in June over Robbie Lawler had success standing with low kicks in spite of the fact that most people diagnosed if it stayed standing, Lawler would have a lot of success there. So that's where guys have success standing against Robbie Lawler. I think it's going to be tough for Jacare to do what he did against Tim Kennedy, try to jab and put combinations together for 25 minutes and expect not to get hit. But if Lawler does get put on the ground, I don't think he can survive the way Joey Villasenor did. He might make it around, but I don't see him fighting off 10, 15 minutes worth of the kind of suffocating top position control that Jacare Souza has, but more than that, the ability to, like the alligator nickname, the minute there's a scramble, snap a submission on like that.
I agree. I like Jacare as well. Lawler's definitely in this fight, though.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's important is it's not just about picking a guy. It's about recognizing the fact that what makes the fight great is even if Jacare dominated 24.5 minutes, every second of the fight, there's a very realistic chance that one punch could completely change the complexion of the fight. You could have a new Strikeforce middleweight champion as soon as Robbie Lawler throws a big left hook.
And in the main event tomorrow night, we have Evangelista Cyborg Santos taking on Nick Diaz for his welterweight strap. And Jordan Breen, you got a little in-depth thought on this one.
I think there's 2 things you have to consider about a Cyborg Nick Diaz fight. A lot of people looked at it and said, well, obviously Paul Daley is a bigger star. He's more accomplished in the welterweight division. And that's very true. However, there is something to building Paul Daley towards a title fight. My only issue in making the fight is if you do it in January, how long do we have to wait for a Paul Daley Nick Diaz fight? If we can get it in April or May, then no harm, no foul. We're getting lots of Nick Diaz fights then, and everybody likes watching him fight. The only harm is if we get a Cyborg title defense, Nick Diaz wins, and we're left waiting for a challenge with Paul Daley up until the late summer. As for the fight itself, it definitely favors Nick Diaz. There are definite ways to beat Nick Diaz, but it's not a guy like Cyborg who comes out like gangbusters, throws a bunch of strikes, and then gets tired. The one time we've really seen Nick Diaz done in with strikes was early in his career against Jeremy Jackson. He was dropped and then followed up with an absolute chain gun battery of punches that was able to keep him down just long enough to get a referee stoppage. I don't see Cyborg being able to do that. Too much toughness on Nick Diaz's part. I think you might get a lot of heat exchanged early, similar to Diaz's fight with Marius Saromskis, but after that, Diaz will take over the fight. I expect a stoppage in the late first round, early second. Dominant performance from Nick Diaz after that first 90 to 120 seconds.
There you have it. Make sure you check out the broadcast Saturday night. Back to the studio, Sam.
Thanks, Greg. We had the chance to catch up with some of the fighters on tomorrow night's card. Let's take a look.
I feel good. Just gonna make weight, eat what I need to eat so I can make weight, and I feel really good.
Talk about training. You've changed your training up a little bit. You've gone out west to Arizona, worked with Ryan Bader and CB Dalloway. Tell me about that environment in that camp.
It's nice. A lot of bigger guys, a lot of good jiu-jitsu there, and they work hard. They're big guys, having big bodies on top of me that know what they're doing makes work a little harder.
You cited wrestling as the key to keeping this fight on the feet. Should the fight go to the floor, any extra pressure or fear with a guy like Jacare, who's world class on the floor with jiu-jitsu?
No, you don't have time for fear out there. You just gotta work what you need to work to get up to keep the fight going, and that's what I've been doing.
This is your first title defense against Robbie Lawler. Talk about going into this fight as champion. Any extra pressure being the Strikeforce champion?
Você é o campeão do evento. O que vai ser na tua cabeça essa luta contra com o Lawler?
É apenas mais uma luta. Eu tô muito feliz de estar lutando com o Lawler. É um oponente duríssimo. Eu tô feliz de estar aqui, feliz de estar lutando com o Lawler, feliz de estar defendendo meu cinturão. Esse é o trabalho que eu gosto de fazer. Eu luto pela minha família, pelos meus fãs e pelo evento.
Very happy to be here. It's just another fight for me. I'm very happy to fight Lawler. I fight for myself, for my family, for the event. So for me, just go there and another fight.
Robbie says he's going to be able to keep this fight on the feet because of his wrestling. How do you feel about that aspect of the game? Do you feel that you're going to be able to negate his wrestling and get the fight to the floor if you want it there?
O Lawler falou que a gente mantém em pé e eu defender tuas quedas com o wrestling dele. O que você acha? A luta vai ser aonde?
A luta vai ser no chão e com certeza eu vou dar o meu máximo. E se ficar em pé também vou lutar em pé. A luta vai ser em todos os lugares na realidade, mas a minha vontade é que a luta seja no chão.
The fight's going to be everywhere, but for me, I want to take the fight to the ground and we see how it goes. But definitely, it's going to be in the ground sometime during the fight.
My thing is there's no such thing as ring rust. You just get back in the gym, you start training, and then you step into the cage, you have to fight, you have to be ready to throw down. That's all I know, that's all I've ever known. And I tell people all the time, I'm a little bit too old to have ring rust. So whenever I get an opportunity, I got to really show that I can do it.
Every time Strikeforce promotes you, they almost have to apologize to the MMA media and MMA fans for putting you in because it seems as it's a spectacle. Are you sick of that reaction?
Not at all. People don't take this that serious. They think that I don't take this that serious. It's hard to have an athlete that had done some of the things I've done to come into another sport, and people say, "Oh, is he serious about it?" And that's one reason I put all the dedication that I put into this sport, and I invite people. I say, come watch me train, or come do this here, come get involved, because it's easy to sit and talk about it, but it's hard for somebody to come in and see it for themselves. And that's why I say, come see for yourself before you're able to judge it.
Here with Nick Diaz, your second title defense against Evangelista Cyborg Santos. You're outspoken about guys stepping up and fighting you, and Cyborg's a guy who always comes out to fight. What are you expecting in this fight with Cyborg in the pace?
I'm expecting, a real crazy fighter in this guy. He's hardcore, to come out and like I said, earlier, anything can happen. But I'm ready. If that's what's up, I'm ready to take my ass whooping. I get paid for this, and I'm ready. I'm like, you gonna bring it. I'm ready to take it. So,
Talk about the pace again. Is it something that you prepared for? Have you watched tape? I mean, you study Cyborg for this fight?
Yeah, well, yeah, of course, I study everybody I'm going to fight. I know everybody I'm going to fight. I know everybody in the sport, especially that would be, that would be in line to fight, with me, or, just, he's fought a lot of good people, too. I've seen him fight. I've been around him a lot, I don't have bad things to say about him, Him and his wife have been real polite to me in the past, so, we don't have any sort of, we don't have anything between us, anything funny like that. So I'm just going to try to make this, clean fight sort of thing, I guess, right? Or
Animosity is something you've used a lot in the past, though. I mean, is that maybe a weakness for you coming into this fight?
No, I don't think so. I don't think it makes a difference. I think all aside, that doesn't have anything to do with, that's nothing personal. You know what I mean? If you want to make it personal, it can be something personal. But this guy, I don't have any issues against this guy. And like I said, him and his wife have been really polite to me. They're co-workers of mine as far as I'm concerned. I've been here 3 or 4 shows with these guys sitting next to him, sort of thing. So, I don't, no bad blood, just probably a lot of blood.
Let's talk about the buzz and the hype about this event. A lot of people are looking forward to the show in Jersey as the start of the Heavyweight Grand Prix. But you satisfied with the promotion going into this fight card?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is the first fight of the championship series for Strikeforce in 2011. And come on, when you have Nick Diaz in the cage anytime fighting, it's a special night. And Robbie is, with one punch he could turn the tide. Exciting fights, and I think that adding Herschel and Hodger Gracie and Trevor, it's going to be a special night of fights.
What are you expecting out of the championship bouts?
Well, the Jacare fight with Robbie, I think, is going to be a strategic match because it's going to be the bull and the matador, and who's going to go to the ground, who's going to stand up. But the Diaz fight, I think styles make fights. And and I know Evangelista is not a guy he's not going to be afraid to sit down and throw. And so I think that fight goes to the center of the cage, and I think it's just going to start winging it. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Fight Week Live. Be sure to catch tomorrow's Strikeforce Diaz vs. Cyborg live on Showtime at 10 p.m. And visit Sherdog.com for the best coverage on the internet. We'll see you next time right here on Fight Week.